Robert never thought one woman's insult would sting more than 1,000 failures. It happened on an ordinary Thursday evening, in a dim cafe tucked between two busy streets. Tina, with her sharp eyes and sharper tongue, had leaned over the table, her lips curled in a smirk as she said it. "You're cheap, Robert. Cheap in every way that matters." The words slapped harder than any hand could. She said it so calmly, like she'd been saving it for just the right moment. Her tone wasn't even angry, just final. Robert had taken her to that cafe thinking he'd make her smile. He'd spent weeks saving up for the modest dinner, imagining her looking at him with appreciation. He never expected her to scoff at the menu, sighing like she was trapped in a nightmare of poverty. Tina wasn't always like this. He remembered their early days when she used to laugh at silly jokes and hold his hand like it meant something. But lately, her eyes drifted too, often to glittering things. Diamond rings in shop windows, velvet jewelry boxes under golden lights. And her mouth often slipped praises for the women who had them, especially Ella, her glamorous co-worker. Ella wore necklaces that caught the sun, earrings that sparkled like fireflies, and bracelets that chimed softly when she moved. Tina would mention her name almost every day, as if Ella was a standard Robert could never reach. "Ella's boyfriend just surprised her with the new amarette necklace? Isn't that romantic?" Tina would sigh, casting a look at Robert like he was a broken toy she couldn't return. He swallowed the bitterness, always telling himself love wasn't about money, but Tina seemed to think otherwise. That evening at the cafe, her words sealed. "You're cheap, Robert," she repeated, this time slower. "I want more from life. I deserve more." Her eyes sparkled, not with love, but with hunger for things beyond him. Robert left that night with his fists clenched in his pockets, his heart colder than the rain that soaked his coat. He walked the streets alone, past the same jewelry stores. Tina admired, their windows mocking him with displays of luxury he couldn't afford. But something burned in him deeper than pain, a fury mixed with determination. Cheap? No, he'd prove her wrong. The next morning, he did what most men would not dare. He marched into the office of Donald Fairchild, the ruthless investor known for making men rich or ruining them completely. Donald, an old classmate of Robert's, wore success like a second skin. His office smelled of power, with leather chairs and a view that kissed the city skyline. "Help me buy Amarette," Robert declared without flinching. Donald raised an eyebrow, amused. "You? The boy who once borrowed my lunch money?" "Yes," Robert answered, his voice steady. "I want to own it, the whole damn brand." Donald chuckled, then narrowed his eyes. He saw something in Robert's gaze, not desperation, but something darker. A man cornered but not defeated. They spoke for hours, weighing risks, mapping strategies. Donald, never one to pass on chaos if there was profit buried beneath it, agreed to help. For a price. That night, Robert lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Tina's words echoing in his mind. Not with pain anymore, but fuel. Days blurred into weeks. He skipped sleep, forgot meals, buried himself in business plans and meetings, fighting tooth and nail through every obstacle. Money he didn't have flowed from promises he hadn't yet fulfilled, but he kept pushing. Every time he felt exhaustion creeping in, he pictured Tina's face, her lips curled with disdain, her eyes glimmering for things she thought he'd never give her. He'd give her something all right, not just a necklace, not just a ring. He'd give her the whole brand she worshipped and let her choke on it. And somewhere, beneath the rage, a twisted kind of satisfaction began to grow. The weeks turned to months, and Robert's life became an unrelenting storm. He had never known this version of himself existed. The man who could walk into a boardroom full of wolves and tear through every deal like he was born for it. He learned to read people the way Tina had read him that night, spotting weaknesses and playing them to his advantage. Donald watched him with a growing sense of curiosity, even respect. What had started as a favor for an old classmate had transformed into one of the most aggressive acquisitions he'd seen in years. Robert wasn't just trying to buy Amarette, he was obsessed with it. "Careful," Donald warned him one night over whiskey in his glass-walled office. Men chasing ghosts. Burn out fast. Robert's eyes were sharp, his jaw tight. I'm not chasing a ghost. I'm buying proof. Donald didn't push further. He had seen men crumble for less, but Robert wasn't showing signs of cracking. Not yet. Meanwhile, Tina's life was blossoming in the very world Robert was fighting to conquer. She was climbing social ladders, attending high-end events, and flaunting her connection with Ella, who seemed to glide effortlessly through luxury. Tina loved the attention, the whispered compliments about her beauty, the admiration for her taste, but there was always a shadow in her triumph, a missing piece. Robert. Though she acted indifferent, something about his silence gnawed at her. He hadn't begged her to stay. He hadn't even called. She told herself it was good, that she didn't need a man who couldn't keep up with her desires. But in quiet moments, she found herself wondering if she had misjudged him. Ella noticed it too. You still think about him, Ella teased, brushing a loose strand of Tina's hair behind her ear as they sipped champagne at a boutique launch. Tina scoffed, hiding her unease behind a forced smile. He was never enough, but the words felt hollow. As Tina tried to drown her doubts in luxury, Robert was making moves she could never have imagined. Through relentless persistence and calculated aggression, Robert had managed to gain the attention of Amorette's largest stakeholders. He exposed flaws in their supply chain, predicted market trends before they unfolded, and proposed visions that made their current executives look like amateurs. He wasn't buying a brand anymore, he was seizing an empire. When the deal was finally set to close, Robert stood in the polished marble lobby of Amorette's headquarters, signing the final documents. His heart thundered in his chest, but his hands didn't shake. He had come too far to falter now. Donald clapped him on the back, with a laugh. Congratulations, Mr. Prescott. You're now the proud owner of the jewelry brand every woman drools over. Robert gave a tight nod, his mind already racing to the next step. He wasn't done yet. He ordered a full internal review of the company's assets and instructed his team to prepare for a lavish relaunch, one that would make headlines, turn heads, and most importantly, draw out Tina like a moth to flame. News of Amorette's new ownership spread like wildfire, splashed across business columns and whispered in high society circles. Tina read the headlines while sitting in a sun-drenched cafe, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through her phone. Amorette acquired an aggressive takeover by unknown tycoon, Robert Prescott. Her breath hitched. Prescott? Her. Robert? The same man she had dismissed as cheap, incapable of rising to her level? Ella, sitting across from her, caught the change in her expression and frowned. What is it? Tina swallowed hard, forcing her face into a mask of nonchalance. Nothing, she lied, slipping her phone into her purse. Just business news. But her heart was racing. That evening, alone in her apartment, she reread the article a dozen times, unable to deny the twisting knot in her chest. Her mind replayed every harsh word she'd thrown at him, every time she'd looked at him like he was beneath her. Now, he stood atop the very empire she had admired from afar. And for the first time, Tina felt something she had never expected to feel toward Robert Prescott. Fear. The city skyline burned with lights as Tina paced her apartment floor, her bare feet silent against the cold wooden panels. Outside, the hum of luxury cars and chatter of the wealthy filled the air, but inside her chest, there was only a storm. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't think straight. Robert Prescott, the man she had called cheap, the man she had discarded like a bad investment, had become the owner of Amorette, the very brand she had worshipped. It felt like a cruel twist of fate. She thought. Of all the nights she had teased him about her dreams of glittering jewels, her desire for a life that sparkled just as brightly. He had listened in silence, she remembered, his eyes dark and unreadable. She had mistaken his quietness for weakness, for failure. But now she saw it for what it was, calculation. And worst of all, she realized he hadn't just bought the company for profit. He had bought it for her, or rather because of her. Tina's phone buzzed on the table. She snatched it up, her breath caught in her throat. It was a message from Ella. Did you see this? They're hosting an exclusive relaunch gala for Amoret next weekend. Invitation only. Everyone who's anyone will be there. Her eyes darted. Over the words, her heart pounding faster. Ella sent another message before Tina could reply. We have to go. You need to go. Tina stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, I'll get us in. She didn't know how yet, but she would. She had to see him. Had to face him. Meanwhile, across the city, Robert stood before the mirrored wall of his penthouse suite, fastening his cufflinks with precise, almost mechanical movements. His eyes were sharp, but beneath the surface there was a storm brewing. In him, too. He hadn't heard from Tina since the news broke, but he knew it was only a matter of time. Women like her could resist many things, but not the scent of power, not the glitter of status. Donald strolled into the room, straightening his tie as he glanced at Robert's reflection. She'll come, he said simply, as if reading Robert's thoughts. Robert didn't answer, but deep down he knew Donald was right. Tina would come. She would have no choice. The night of the gala arrived like thunder on the horizon. Amoret's headquarters had been transformed into a palace of light and crystal. Massive chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, their reflections dancing across walls lined with velvet drapes. Every display case sparkled with the finest jewels, each one a silent testament to Robert's victory. Guests in designer suits and glittering gowns filled the space, their voices a blend of admiration and envy. Cameras flashed as reporters captured, every moment hungry for a glimpse of the man behind the takeover. Robert entered the room like a shadow made of steel, every eye turning toward him as if pulled by invisible strings. He carried the weight of triumph on his shoulders, and it showed in every measured step, every cold flicker of his gaze. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw her, Tina. She had arrived draped in a silver gown that hugged her curves like it had been crafted for her alone. Diamonds glittered at her throat, borrowed, no doubt. But it wasn't the jewelry that caught Robert's attention. It was the fear buried beneath her practiced smile. Their eyes met across the room, a silent collision of past and present, of wounds and weapons. She tried to hold his gaze, to appear unaffected, but Robert saw it all. The regret, the hunger, the realization that she had underestimated him in the worst possible way. Donald leaned closer and murmured, Shall I introduce you, or would you prefer to let her come crawling? Robert's lips curled into a slight, dangerous smile. She'll come. And just as he predicted, Tina began to move through the crowd, each step cautious yet inevitable, like a moth drawn to the flame she once believed she controlled. As she approached, Robert's heart didn't race. There was no trembling, no uncertainty. Only a cold, satisfied calm. She stopped a few feet from him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of the man she once dismissed. But that man was long gone. Robert, she breathed, her voice soft yet tight with tension. Miss me? He replied, his tone razor-sharp, slicing through the air between them. Her lips parted as if to answer, but no words came. She hadn't expected this version of him. She hadn't expected to feel so small. And Robert, enjoying every second of her discomfort, didn't rush to fill the silence. He wanted her to feel it, the weight of her mistake. He wanted her to drown in it. For a moment, the noise of the gala faded into a hollow hum around them. Tina's throat felt dry, her mind scrambling for the right thing to say, but nothing she could think of sounded powerful enough to erase the weight of her past words. Not anymore. Robert let her stand there in that uncomfortable silence, let her soak in the cold truth. He didn't move an inch. He simply watched her, like a lion watching a wounded gazelle, knowing it would eventually collapse from its own weakness. Finally, Tina forced a small, tight smile, tilting her head slightly in an attempt to recover. Her dignity. You've done well for yourself, she managed, but her voice wavered just enough for him to hear the cracks beneath the polished surface. Robert's expression didn't change. Better than cheap, wouldn't you say? The words struck like a slap, making her chest tighten with shame. She opened her mouth to reply, but again, no words arrived in time. Ella, standing at a distance, watched the scene unfold with sharp curiosity. She could feel the tension thick in the air, almost visible, like a thread stretched to its breaking point. Donald approached then, carrying 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to Robert with a sly smirk, before casually handing the other to Tina, as if to witness the burn up close. To the future, Donald said smoothly, raising his glass. Robert clinked his own against Donald's without once breaking eye contact with Tina. To learning from the past. She raised her glass hesitantly, her fingers tightening around the delicate stem as she forced herself to smile back, though her heart thudded painfully in her chest. As the night unfolded, Robert found himself surrounded by executives, investors, and influential socialites eager to align themselves with the new king of luxury. But even as he navigated conversations, signed autographs, and gave polite nods to admiration, his gaze kept returning to Tina. He could see the way she kept her distance, yet couldn't stop glancing at him, caught between pride and regret, unable to walk away from the spectacle of his rise. Tina's mind was in turmoil. She replayed every memory of their past together, seeing it now with brutal clarity. She had judged him not by his heart or his will, but by his bank account and the shine of his shoes. She thought she had outgrown him, that he would always remain below her, a shadow in her bright world. But tonight, the roles were cruelly reversed. She was just another guest, another pair of eyes in the crowd, while he stood as the master of the empire she had once worshipped. Ella, ever the opportunist, stepped closer to Tina and whispered, "You underestimated him. I never thought he had it in him either, but look at him now." Tina swallowed the bitter lump rising in her throat. "It's just money," she whispered back, her words hollow. Ella's laugh was low and sharp. "It's power, and you love power, don't you?" The truth stung more than Tina cared to admit. As the gala continued, Robert eventually allowed himself to drift toward Tina again, this time not as the man who chased her approval, but as the man who had conquered her dreams and left her behind. "Enjoying the evening?" he asked smoothly, his voice deep and calm, carrying that same quiet power that made the whole room listen when he spoke. Tina lifted her chin, trying to summon the confidence that once came so easily. "It's impressive," she replied carefully. "I won't pretend otherwise." Robert's gaze didn't soften. "You shouldn't." There was no mercy in his tone, no warmth left for the woman who had dismissed him like a failed investment, and Tina saw it, fully, painfully. He wasn't trying to win her back. He wasn't looking for her approval anymore. No, he wanted her to watch him soar without her, and she did. She watched, helplessly, as he owned the night, as the cameras loved him, as the influencers fawned over him, as the world she had always desired placed him at its center. Robert Prescott, the man she once called cheap, had become the man everyone now wanted to stand beside. Everyone, including her. The gala began to wind down, but the tension between them only tightened, like a rope pulling her closer to a reality she didn't want to face. Tina lingered by the long marble bar, pretending to sip her champagne while her eyes tracked Robert across the room. He was magnetic now in a way she had never imagined. Not because of wealth alone, though that, undeniably, wrapped him in an aura of power, but because of how he carried it. He didn't flaunt it like she once thought he would if he ever came into fortune. No, he wore success like armor, sharp and untouchable. Ella had drifted off to charm a group of young financiers, but Tina couldn't move. Her feet felt nailed to the floor, her pride sinking beneath the weight of her mistake. She had thrown away a man who hadn't just become wealthy, he had become unstoppable. Robert noticed her watching. Of course he did. He had always been hyper-aware of her, even when she acted as though he didn't matter. He crossed the space between them slowly, not out of desire but out of sheer, deliberate control. He stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the faint trace of his cologne. a scent she didn't recognize, expensive and commanding. "Tell me, Tina," he said in a voice so smooth it made her skin prickle. "Do you still believe I'm cheap?" Her mouth went dry. She forced a tight smile, though it felt like her face might crack under the pressure. "Clearly, I misjudged you." "Clearly," he echoed, not letting her off the hook so easily. "There" was a sharp edge in his tone, a cold satisfaction that twisted deeper than any insult she had ever thrown at him, and Tina hated, truly hated, how deeply it cut her. "I underestimated you, Robert," she admitted, dropping her eyes for just a second. The vulnerability tasted bitter on her tongue. "Maybe I wanted too much, too fast." Robert's laugh was low, humorless. "No, you wanted someone already built, not someone building." His words rang too true, slicing right through her fragile defenses. She looked up at him, her eyes softening, almost pleading. "I see it now," she confessed. "I see you." But Robert wasn't here for apologies. Not tonight. Not ever, perhaps. "You see me because you have no choice," he replied, his voice a quiet storm. "You see me because I forced you to. But understand this, Tina. I didn't build all this to win you back." Her chest tightened painfully. She wanted to protest, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth sat between them like a wall of glass. Transparent. Undeniable. "I built it," he continued, "so you would live every day knowing what you threw away." Tina swallowed hard, blinking back the sting of tears. She had never seen him like this. So powerful, so untouchable, so far beyond her reach. Robert finished his drink and set the empty glass down with quiet finality. Without giving her another glance, he turned and walked away, swallowed by the crowd of admirers waiting to bask in his light. Ella returned to Tina's side, watching Robert's retreating figure with a slow shake of her head. "He's not the same man, Tina," she said softly, almost with admiration. "I know," Tina whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of regret. "I know," but knowing made it worse. The man she had once belittled now stood on a mountain of success, and she was left in the valley of her choices, watching him grow smaller in the distance as he climbed higher than she could ever follow. As the gala ended and guests spilled out into waiting limousines, Tina lingered in the now quiet showroom, her gaze locked on a display of the very jewels she had once dreamed of wearing, now owned by the man who no longer dreamed of her. The days that followed the gala were heavier than any Tina had ever known. No matter where she went, Robert's name echoed through the city like a storm refusing to pass. Newspapers, magazines, online forums, everywhere she turned, there he was. Robert Prescott's dazzling takeover of Amaret. From nobody to king of luxury, the man behind the empire. How one man outsmarted giants to rule the jewelry world. It wasn't just business news anymore. It was society gossip, dinner party conversation, whispers at every boutique opening, and high society brunch. Even Ella, who had always been her source of status, now spoke of Robert with thinly veiled admiration. "He's the man of the moment," Ella said one morning over brunch, her fingers lazily scrolling through her phone. "Everyone wants a piece of him." Tina forced a brittle laugh, stirring her untouched coffee. "Do they?" Ella's eyes flicked up from her screen, sharp as razors. "Come on, Tina. Let's not pretend you're not thinking about him every second." Tina's chest tightened, but she didn't answer. She couldn't, because Ella was right, and they both knew it. Robert wasn't just invading her thoughts. He was consuming them. Every night she replayed their last conversation at the gala, the cold finality in his voice, the way he had looked through her like she was nothing more than a shadow of his past. Worse yet, she caught herself searching for him at every event, every crowded room, her eyes flicking to the entrances, hoping, no, needing, to see him again. But he wasn't there. He didn't need to be. He owned the stage now, and she was just another member of the audience clapping too late. Then came the invitation. It arrived in a black envelope, embossed with the Amaret crest in gold. Her heart jumped as she opened it, hands trembling. You are cordially invited to the Amoret private exhibition, a showcase of the new legacy. Tina swallowed hard. It was signed, in fine print at the bottom, Robert Prescott, Chairman. Her first instinct was to think it was a mistake, a cruel twist of fate to torment her further. But no, this was deliberate. She could feel it. Ella leaned over her shoulder, reading the invitation. Looks like you're still on his radar, she murmured, her voice laced with something that felt like both envy and curiosity. Tina's chest fluttered with a dangerous hope, a foolish spark she tried desperately to smother. Maybe it's just a professional invite, she said, but the words felt like lies even as she spoke them. Ella arched a perfectly shaped brow. You really believe that? Tina didn't answer. That night, she stood before her mirror longer than she cared to admit, holding up dresses, applying and reapplying her makeup, each attempt more desperate than the last. She hated herself for caring so much, but she couldn't help it. She needed to look perfect, flawless, like she belonged in his world again. When she finally arrived at the private exhibition, she was draped in deep emerald silk, her hair twisted into a style that framed her face delicately, her earrings catching the light just enough to draw attention. The exhibition hall was breathtaking. Glass cases showcased the finest pieces of Amoret's collection, each one glittering under carefully positioned lights. Waiters drifted between guests, offering champagne on silver trays, and a string quartet played soft, haunting music that filled the air like a spell. And then she saw him. Robert stood at the center of it all, surrounded by admirers, his posture relaxed but commanding. He was dressed in a tailored black suit, dark tie, and a watch that gleamed with quiet menace on his wrist. As if feeling her gaze, his eyes lifted and met hers across the room. For a fleeting second, something passed between them. An old spark, an echo of the days before ambition and betrayal had poisoned everything, but just as quickly, it was gone. He turned away, continuing his conversation with a foreign investor, leaving Tina standing there, caught between past mistakes and present regret. Her throat tightened as she forced herself to move through the crowd, pretending not to care, pretending she wasn't burning inside. But she felt it. Every step, every glance, every moment of being invisible to the man she once believed would never be more than her shadow. Now, she was his shadow, his past, his discarded mistake. And the cruelest part of all was knowing, deep in her bones, that she had done this to herself. The night deepened, and so did Tina's quiet humiliation. Every moment at the exhibition felt like she was peeling off her pride layer by painful layer. She had thought that maybe, just maybe, the invitation meant something more. That he still saw her as part of his story. But Robert moved through the room like she was invisible, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with cold, undeniable indifference. That stung far worse than hate. She tried to hold conversations, pretended to admire the collection with polite fascination, but her eyes betrayed her. They drifted over and over, back to him. Robert had become what she always wanted, but he had become it without her. Worse yet, he had become it in spite of her. Ella, ever observant, slithered to her side, swirling champagne in her glass as she whispered, "You know, Tina, you could try to fix this. He's still a man." Tina's lips parted, but she hesitated. 1,000 words rushed to her mind, but none of them felt right. Could she fix this? Would he even care if she tried? Ella's eyes glinted with something sharp, almost cruel. Or, she added with a smirk, you could watch him walk away for good. It's your choice. Tina hated how true it was. But before she could gather her courage, the lights dimmed, and Robert stepped onto the small stage set at the center of the exhibition. All eyes turned to him. He stood beneath the soft spotlight, his expression carved from stone, his voice smooth but carrying weight as he addressed the crowd. "Tonight," Robert began, "we're not just showcasing jewelry. We're showcasing the cost of ambition, of hunger, of knowing what you want, and what you're willing to lose to get it." His words struck Tina like a lash. She saw it for what it was, Not a speech, but a quiet confession. A message directed, not at the crowd, but at her. "The new collection," he continued, gesturing to the glimmering pieces displayed around the room, "is called The Price of Desire, because every beautiful thing in this world comes at a cost." His eyes found her for just a breath of a moment, and she knew. Everyone else in the room saw a businessman unveiling his latest triumph, but Tina saw the man she had once belittled, now holding the world in his palm, turning her into nothing more than an example. The crowd applauded, but the sound felt distant to her ears, muffled beneath the pounding of her heart. As guests flocked toward the displays, eager to get a closer look, Tina remained frozen, her eyes locked on Robert as he stepped down from the stage, effortlessly sliding back into the current of admirers and associates. She had to do something. Anything. Summoning the last of her pride, Tina weaved through the crowd until she reached him. She stopped mere inches away, close enough to smell the subtle, expensive cologne on his skin, close enough to feel his presence burn through her composure. "Robert," she said, her voice low, breath catching in her chest. "Can we talk? Alone." He looked at her as if he were studying a painting he no longer cared to own. Calm, cool, detached. "There's nothing left to say, Tina." His reply was so quiet, yet so brutal it twisted like a knife. "Please," she insisted, her pride cracking, under the weight of desperation. "I was wrong. I see it now. I was blind, foolish. But you—" Her voice trembled. "You've become everything I ever dreamed of. Everything I wanted." His eyes, once warm and soft in her memory, were now cold steel. "And you've become—" "Everything I never needed," Robert answered. Not cruelly, but with finality. Her breath caught, her heart sinking to depths she had never known. "You can't mean that," she whispered. "I do," he said simply. Without another word, Robert turned from her, his attention claimed by a waiting investor eager to discuss expanding the brand into Europe. He walked away without hesitation, without looking back, while Tina stood motionless, drowning in the truth of her own making. Ella, watching from a distance, exhaled a slow breath and murmured under her breath, "He didn't just win, Tina. He buried you in the victory." Tina's eyes stung, but no tears fell. She had no right to cry. Not here. Not now. Not after everything. Tina stayed long after the exhibition faded into quiet echoes, after the wealthy guests drifted out into their chauffeurs and the lights dimmed, to a soft glow over the empty showroom. The jewels still gleamed in their cases, cold and untouchable, much like Robert himself. She stood in front of a necklace that had once been her fantasy, a delicate cascade of diamonds shaped like falling stars. She used to imagine Robert surprising her with it, slipping it around her neck as proof that he was enough. Now it sat behind glass, his brand, his triumph, his silent reminder of everything she had lost. Ella, loyal to the end but never sentimental, came to stand beside her, arms folded across her chest. "It's over, Tina," she said softly, but without comfort. "He's not yours to reach anymore." Tina swallowed down the lump in her throat, forcing her voice to stay even. "I know," but knowing didn't dull the pain. Meanwhile, high above them in the executive suite overlooking the showroom, Robert watched Tina through the glass wall, unseen. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone, but his eyes held a depth that betrayed a shadow of conflict. Donald sat beside him, nursing a crystal glass of whiskey. "You could have ruined her tonight," Donald remarked, almost with a touch of admiration. "Crushed her completely in front of everyone." Robert's gaze didn't leave Tina as he replied, "I didn't need to." Donald smirked. "No, she's ruined herself." It was true. Tina wasn't humiliated by a public scene or harsh words. She was destroyed by something far colder, her own choices, her own blindness, her own pride. Robert had become the man she always claimed she wanted. Yet he had done it not for her but to leave her behind, and she felt it. Every inch of her felt it. As Tina turned away from the display, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, she carried the weight of his silent verdict on her shoulders. She had played the game of status, of desire, of ambition, and lost to the very man she had once looked down on. Outside, the night had settled into a heavy fog. The city lights blurred as she stepped into the cold air, wrapping her arms around herself. Ella walked beside her, quiet for once, as if sensing there was nothing left to say. They climbed into the waiting car, and as it pulled away from the exhibition hall, Tina allowed herself one last glance back through the tinted window. She saw Robert standing there, high above, a distant figure in the glass tower he had built with his own hands, looking down at the empire he now ruled. There was no triumph in her heart, no lingering hope, only the hollow ache of knowing that she had been nothing more than a stepping stone on his path to greatness, and that he would never, not in this life or the next, look back for her again. As the car disappeared into the foggy streets, Robert turned away from the window, his face unreadable as ever. But deep within him, beneath the layers of victory and vengeance, a small part of him whispered that this was how it had to be. She had taught him to hunger, but he had taught her to starve. And with that final, brutal truth, their story closed like the last page of a book neither of them would ever open again.